Our top story at 8, toxic waters and politics. The oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico is uncovering some dirty details. Plans are underway to try and cap the spill. But just how massive is it? And what's the politics behind what's really going on behind the scenes? Investigative journalist and RT contributor Wayne Madison joins me here in the studio to discuss this a bit more. Now, tell me a bit about the figures involved. How much money did Obama receive from BP during his election, during his campaign election?
Well, we know that President Obama received more cash from BP than his two opponents, Hillary Clinton in a Democratic primary and John McCain in the general election. $71,000 doesn't seem like a lot, but more than Mrs. Clinton and Senator McCain.
So it seems as though even during the 2008 campaign season, Obama was receiving, or at least a lot of these corporations were really donating big time to Obama, although he said he was very anti-corporate donations, anti-corporations in general. Well,
judging from what he's doing, not only with the oil spill, but with the Wall Street crisis, too big to fail, helping out Goldman Sachs. They were big contributors to his campaign as well. I think basically what we have in President Obama, he's been a big disappointment to people who had high hopes that he actually, his campaign promises that he was going to crack down on Wall Street were just merely shallow promises.
So, Wayne, are these corporations still sort of running the show here in Washington, affecting what's happening down at the Gulf of Mexico?
Well, it's a carry-on from the Bush administration. Obviously, Bush, Cheney were, essentially big oil had control over the White House. We do know that the shutoff valve, that not only with the platform that exploded in the Gulf, but all the other platforms, Halliburton, that these shutoff valves were supposed to have been inspected by the Minerals Management Service, but apparently from my sources in the oil industry in the Gulf say that these were just rubber stamp operations. They really didn't do much in the way of any inspections, and we should recall it was the Minerals Management Service which collects royalties from the oil and natural gas industry for the drilling on federal property. They get the royalties, and we know that during the Bush administration the Minerals Management Service was hit very hard on having spending money on wild parties. There was sex scandals and drug use and alcohol abuse. So we do know this track record with this particular agency.
Sounds sort of juicy, but I mean, it goes back to how massive is this thing and how much is being reported or that we know about.
Well, yes, and there's a real deficit gap in what is really going on in the Gulf of Mexico. Sources I have with FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, the Army Corps of Engineers, and the Florida Department of Environment are all saying, first of all, this is something they've never dealt with before. The magnitude of this is unbelievable. The Corps of Engineers trying to get access to some NASA photos from satellites showing how extensive this oil slick is, because what we're seeing is where the crude oil is really in high density, but when you look at the NASA photos, it's spread out over a much larger area. The submersibles that are on the bottom are what they're seeing are images of what looks like a gaping chasm just spewing oil out. So it's really not a leak from a pipe, it's a leak from the seabed. So it's huge. There's a danger that this spill could get caught up in the Gulf Stream, come up the eastern seaboard, and not only could it decimate the fishing grounds of the Gulf of Mexico, but if it gets in the Gulf Stream, it's the East Coast and eventually the Grand Banks off in Newfoundland, which is one of the richest fishing grounds in the world.
So from what you know, is BP involved in any kind of PR moves to try to placate this as nothing so big and I guess try to get our concerns off what they might be doing behind the scenes with the administration?
Well, they are. We have this litigation fund. It's capped right now at $75 million. BP has been negotiating with the Obama administration to raise that to $10 billion, but I'm hearing that this could potentially be a $1 trillion disaster. $10 billion is a drop in the bucket.
Fascinating stuff. That's Wayne Madison, RT contributor and investigative journalist here in Washington.